Charles.
I'm Linda Quinlan.
Okay, and that does make me Keith Ghostland. Welcome to All Things LGBTQ. We are taping on Tuesday, April 29th, I'm told. We tape at Orchid Media in Montpelier, Vermont, which we recognize. This is unceded Indigenous land. And with that, you're taking us to far and distant lands.
I know. And as is my custom, I'd like to start the international news with a statement about Gaza. Amnesty International issued a statement today, rightly describing the live-streamed genocide in Gaza and decrying it, and I share their views entirely, especially concerning the U.S. government's complicity in it. It's absolutely unacceptable.
Before you go on, thank you for continuing to remind us, because they're trying to silence specifically that kind of statement on a federal level. Thank you.
And locally,
Yeah.
with student demonstrators and so
yeah.
forth. Yeah. Well, there's some bad news from England, but I'm going to hold it and start with positive news. In the world, I'm counting this as world news, Elton John and Brandi Carlile unite to raise $1 million to offset the Trump cuts in HIV/AIDS relief funding. They each have a foundation, Elton John AIDS Foundation and Brandi Carlile's Looking Out Foundation. They announced the initiative, the Who Believes in Angels campaign, to offset all the cuts to HIV/AIDS funding. The partnership, named after the collaborative team, it's an emergency initiative. It will maintain essential services following significant cuts because of the USAID support that has been cut by Trump.
Is this worldwide? They're giving money worldwide?
Yes,
or? Okay.
and international funding has been critical to reducing the new HIV transmissions and deaths worldwide. However, many countries, in addition to the U.S., are now considering cuts to the aid. Recent projections from Lancet HIV, based on data from 26 countries, estimate that up to 10.8 million additional HIV cases and 2.9 million HIV-related deaths could occur by 2030 if international support declines.
Right.
It was a lifelong dream come true for me to come together with my hero and friend Elton John to make our album Who Believes in Angels. And Susan Loyne talked about that, I remember, on a recent show. And now we're excited to announce that our foundations are also partnering to make our music mean even more, said Carlile. Elton's activism and work with the Elton John AIDS Foundation is what has led me to Elton. It led me to Elton even before I heard about his music. It's an incredible honor to launch this partnership and raise funds for the life-saving work of the Elton John AIDS Foundation and the Rocket Response Fund, which is Carlile's foundation, at a time when support is needed the most. So,
You know, I read that she had a really hard time with him getting to get the concert done.
really?
Yeah. I guess he's having some issues with, like, you know, not being ready or not. I don't know.
Frustration, I think. I
Yeah.
read it. I saw a couple
Yeah,
of clips.
something like that. But it got done, and it's great. And Brandi is certainly an angel herself.
I was going to say, think about the fun we have working with each other, and Elton is a little older than we are. So just imagine.
I know.
All right, more good news from North America. This time, the victorious Canadian leader, Mark Carney, has carried the Liberal Party to victory. Let's look at a picture of him. And I heard from...
Donald Trump did one good thing.
Yes, that's right. The basis of his campaign that, you know, galvanized it was his anti-Trump stance. And in fact, in his acceptance speech, he came out with many strong statements about Trump's intentions about Canada that they plan to thwart, and rightly so. And on LGBTQ rights, and I'm grateful to Linda for giving me this story, He, well, let me step back. His center left Liberal Party was trailing until Trump was elected and gave him a cause celeb. He's a former banker. He took over after Justin Trudeau resigned, but now he's been elected to a full term by a slim margin, Amy Goodman says on Democracy Now! And as of this morning, it's still not clear whether the Liberal Party will win enough seats for a majority in Parliament. He said about LGBTQ rights on April 9th, he made a speech addressing the rights of LGBTQ Canadians at a political event in Calgary. The first time he addressed our issues during the election campaign. A reporter with the Canadian Press asked him if his government would protect access to gender-affirming care under the Canada Health Act, and also what he would do about the backsliding that the reporter suggested gender and sexual minorities in Canada are facing. Carney responded to say he would defend the rights of all Canadians, saying we are all Canadians, but we all have different identities and distinctions. And one of the great strengths of this country is recognizing that people can be who they are, they can love who they love, they can live where they live, and it's fundamentally important that the federal government is the defender of those rights. In terms of what he said about the LGBTQ community, that pretty much sums it up. He really hasn't been vocal about these issues in the past, but the wider Liberal Party has a great record, including Justin Trudeau, in protecting queer rights. Trudeau was the first Canadian Prime Minister to march in an LGBTQ plus pride parade, also in 2016, and again in 2017. He went on to pose for the cover of a gay magazine, Attitude, in 2017 and again in 2022. He made history by becoming the first world leader to appear in an episode of any Drag Race franchise, showing up in the Drag Race Canada workroom. Now, the opponent had a really mixed record, and what he did was he posed for a picture at a straight pride event. And he was photographed with a man wearing an anti-LGBTQ straight pride t-shirt at the Calgary Stampede, which had a "Thank a Straight Person Today for Their Existence" in black capital letters with straight pride underneath. He tried to disavow it, but he was vocally gender critical, as they say. So good news from Canada.
Yes.
Now, let's go to South America. I'd like to show you a picture now of Brazilian Congresswoman Erica Hilton. She is transgender, and she was trying to go to a Brazil conference at Harvard and MIT that would have allowed that, anyway, she was turned down at the border. The conference took place earlier this month. I was classified as male by the U.S. government when I went to get my visa, wrote Hilton, who added the visa that she received from the U.S. in 2023, listed her gender as female. Hilton is a black travesti and trans person and former sex worker from Sao Paulo who won a seat in the Brazilian Congress in 2022. The Washington Blade spoke with her after the election, and she said, "It's a big responsibility. I feel very honored. I very much like to be able to be a representative for my people, and more than 250,000 people who voted for me have confidence in me."
You have time for one more story.
All right, let's stay in Brazil, and I'd like to tell you about a 2024 film from Brazil called Baby, and let me give you a little plot summary. After his release from a juvenile center, Wellington finds himself homeless in Sao Paulo. At a porn theater, he meets Ronaldo, who mentors him in street survival. Their bond evolves into a turbulent affair. So now let's look at a clip from Baby.
Vem, moleque.
Puta do caralho!
O que tá vindo aí? Gente, eu não tô acreditando. Como que você tá?
Ai, hoje eu tô bem na pior. Olha, roubaram meu celular e me deixaram com isso de presente.
Olha só quem apareceu. Tava sumida a senhora, né? Desapareceu das redes, sumiu das festas. O que aconteceu?
Tava no interior, na casa da minha tia.
Aham, sei. Não foi isso que eu ouvi. Andaram dizendo que a senhora foi presa.
Não começa, David.
Interesting.
And
Is
I
that
go where
new?
to see it.
Well, you can, it's also called Baby do Brazil in the Portuguese. It's available on several streaming platforms, including Amazon Prime, Netflix. It's also possible to find it on Movieland and YouTube. So
okay.
Baby,
I'll look for it.
good.
Well, we're going to start off in California, where a group of Republicans sparked controversy for their plan to host an event dubbed a normal gay social.
I'm not going there, and you can't make me.
The party referenced something J.D. Vance said before 2004 elections. I wouldn't be surprised if me and Trump won the normal gay vote. Vance told podcast host Joe Rogan because they just wanted to be left the hell alone. Normal says, he explained a post. Crazy stuff like prescribing puberty blockers to transgender minors. So you just have to be a normal gay. All right, moving
You
on.
say that as I'm wearing this T-shirt?
Oh my God. Anyway, organizers and artists are scrambling to find a new venue after the Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts abruptly canceled a week's worth of events celebrating LGBTQ plus rights tied to this summer's World Pride Festival in Washington, D.C. The decision follows a sweeping leadership overhaul at one of America's premier cultural institutions led by President Donald Trump and has ignited backlash across the LGBTQ community. So.
I'm worried about World Pride.
I know it.
I know. I don't think it's going to do very well, but we'll see. Richmond, Virginia. Republican John Reed said Friday he will continue his campaign to be Virginia's lieutenant governor and denied he had anything to do with a social media account containing sexual explicit photos that had prompted Governor Glenn Youngkin to call for him to quit the race. Reed, the first openly gay man to run statewide in Virginia and a supporter of Youngkin, posted a video response to the governor's attempt to stymie his candidacy. After the governor learned of the photos on a Tumblr account with a username matching the candidate's Instagram handle, Reed said the account was a fabrication that comes as he grapples with increasing pressure to exit the race by members of his own party.
I was going to say a sort of interesting connection is the bill that was passed about creating AI, artificial explicit images, and this has been a problem in the gay men's community for quite a while.
Yeah.
People fabricating
IDs
accounts
or
using,
whatever,
using
yeah.
your identity.
Well, you know, maybe he's a normal gay.
Moving on.
Well, speaking of AI, I wasn't going to cover this story, but after the Pope died,
Yeah.
There was a anti-gay group in Greece that started sending around AI pictures of the Pope draped in a rainbow flag, and excoriating him for his so-called support for gay rights. But then it was revealed, so another meme went around with these two pictures, AI generated, with the label fake across it. So mischief everywhere.
You just can't tell anymore.
I know.
I'm sorry, but we
That's
distract
okay.
we distract you.
You have to have common sense, but
Oh,
Excuse me?
I know. Well,
Moving on.
the LGBT Victory Fund presented two allies. Here are their pictures. Maryland Governor Wes Moore and California Attorney General Rob Bonta with awards at its national campaign brunch Sunday at the Ritz-Carlton in Washington, D.C. Moore received the Equality Champion Award, while Bonta received the Allyship Award. Both are Democrats, and here are their pictures. Hours after receiving a 7-year federal prison sentence for a sweeping fraud scheme, former Republican Congressman George Santos made a public plea Friday night for pardon from President Donald Trump, framing his conviction not as justice served, but as a politically motivated punishment. By Saturday, he doubled by promoting his Cameo account as Lifeline to help pay bills to fulfill judicial obligations. What's your guess? Trump's not going to.
I don't think so.
I don't even want to consider it.
And Black AF Week, organized by the National Anomaly Initiative, will open Saturday in Texas, largest city, and will continue through May 4th. It will feature music, dancing, drag, a yacht brunch, and more. This year's theme is something more important than ever, says Ian L. Haddock, founder and executive director of Normal Anomaly.
Normal anomaly?
Yeah. I know.
She's on a normal streak today.
Politicians and other campaigning against diversity and trying to squash representation of black people, LGBTQ people, and basically anyone who isn't white and straight. We need visibility, Haddock says. Our visibility is not for the people who are trying to silence us. It's for the people who are scared to see that we're still here. So that will be good. The University of Louisville, a public institution in Kentucky, has canceled its LGBTQ graduation event and reached nearly a $1.6 billion settlement with a former professor who sued, claiming that his anti-transgender comments had led to his demotion and firing. In March, the Republican-controlled Kentucky legislature overrode Democrat Governor Andy Beshear's veto of a bill banning DEI initiatives at public colleges and universities in the state. At the national level, Donald Trump's administration has threatened to revoke federal funding from schools with DEI programs. On Saturday, however, two federal courts issued preliminary injunctions blocking that guidance from the Department of Education. And I have one more story, and then we'll move on to Keith. The Defense Department is complying with a court order that found the restrictions on trans service members unconstitutional. Federal judges have blocked the ban in two separate lawsuits, and one appeals court has denied the department's request to lift the block while legal challenges proceed. Donald Trump's administration has now appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. So there you go.
And did you know that April might be National Humor Month?
No.
No.
April Fool's Day. Think of that. So, who is credited for being the first out LGBTQ plus stand-up comedian. And when I found the answer, I also had a bit of a disagreement with it. So I'm going to report on both. So looking at events, again, May 6th would have been Brenda Churchill's birthday. Our House of Representatives will be doing a joint resolution that day commemorating Brenda and her work. The House convenes at 10 in the morning. They have their usual business, so I'm not sure what time the resolution will truly be read. Please be there. Also connected to that, on June 2nd at Zero Gravity, Christine Hultquist is in the process of organizing a gathering starting at 5:30 just to spend some time remembering Brenda. Christine said that she's going to be working on information flyers to put out on social media, so be looking for that. Rainbow Umbrella, book discussion group, stole Kool-Aids.
Yes, and may I add something?
Oh,
right now?
absolutely.
Cutler Library in Plainfield has organized an LGBTQIA book group, and it meets the first Saturday of every
And
month.
it's not your normal book group.
Really, because there's no assignment. You just arrive and talk with other people about what you're reading. So you don't have to do any homework for it. It's on Saturday. We're going to go on the 4th between
Sunday,
1
isn't
and
it?
2. I think it's Saturday. I'll double check.
That's
but it's the
great,
first Saturday of
isn't it?
every month. I think it's great.
I used to serve on their board of trustees.
Well, there we go.
So women's discussion group discussion it currently is?
Ann Applebaum,
Ah.
political analyst of great interest.
And I could connect going on the Facebook pages.
Yes.
Okay. Rainbow Bridge Community Center, and again, phenomenal work putting their schedule up. Queer Coffee Clash.
Yes, I
Thursdays
went.
10. Okay, no, that's what I was going to ask you. How was it?
Slow. Well,
Well, we're over 50. What do you expect?
please come out and join us. We need more people. It's a fun group, and we should go from there. So come join us on Thursday between 10 and 12.
All right. So also posted on the community center site, the Lamoille County Players are doing the Rocky Horror Picture Show. Now they're going to be doing it starting at the weekend
I would
that
like
this
that.
airs, but the following weekend, starting Friday, May 9th, they're doing it as well. There's a warning of no one under 17 admitted without parent or guardian. You can go on their website, get details, order tickets.
Good.
Now, the next event,
Can we
I-
throw things like we do at the movies?
I think that's why it's the no under 17.
Yeah.
I think it's the full engagement. But,
Yeah.
Okay, the next event I found on Gay Outdoors, and I happened to mention it to Linda over breakfast, and we both said, we know that event, but we really don't know that much about it.
Right.
World Naked Bike Race, bike ride. It is going to be happening in Montpelier, and Montpelier is the only location in Vermont on June 14th. Start meeting at Dog River Park and Ride at 1 o'clock. The ride itself's at 2. Linda said she's usually on the streets cheering them on. Okay, this event has been going on since 2007.
Wow.
And while it's not specifically an LGBTQ plus event, our community has been actively involved. We are welcomed. And we're sort of helping with the organizing this year. So,
And I said, why, Keith, why aren't you on this bike ride?
because I don't ride a bike.
Well, let's go back to the library. I stand
Oh.
corrected. It is Sunday,
Okay.
April 4th,
Okay.
May 4th, so I apologize.
And let me put out a promo for the Cutler. It is a sweet little community library. It is comfortable. It's relaxed.
Seems very friendly.
Have a good time.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Okay, so because I know time is short for us, Mosaic, sexual violence program in Barry, May 9th, starting at 4:30 p.m. on the State House lawn, is End the Violence, Take Back the Night. There will be a rally, there will be speeches, then there'll be a march up to Hubbard Park. Really quickly, look on the Pride Center site. The annual transplant, plant sale, and block party is back, May 10th. All proceeds go to funding their trans-related programs. Also go on their website. Their 25th anniversary gala is on May 29th at the Main Street Landing Performing Arts Center. I can't believe it's been 25 years that they've been around. But now you're going to take me to places and tell me about things I don't want to go to.
Well, I'm going to start with a good story.
Oh,
It's-
and
I think it's a model that reminds us that no matter how bad it gets, one could say it could get worse. But this story exemplifies the opposite. Poland has finally repealed the country's last LGBTQ free zone. And thanks to Linda for sending me this wonderful story. I'm going to report about it at length because it shows us that things can improve. 10 years after the far-right Law and Justice Party was elected to power in Poland, and 2 years after their defeat in the national elections, which was a momentous occasion in itself, a last vestige of the party's state-sanctioned anti-LGBTQ policies has finally been eliminated. On Thursday, a council in the southeastern Polish town of Lankut officially abolished the country's last LGBTQ-free resolution. A resolution introduced by the previous government was one among 100. Remember, there were 100 that
Yes.
declared local regions LGBT-free or banning LGBT ideology, barring the promotion of homosexuality and other minority sexual identities, especially in schools. The resolution, the declarations drew criticism from human rights groups as well as the European Union, which withheld funding, and this shows you that, action is possible and maybe works. Action works, maybe. Which withheld funding from Poland on the grounds that the resolutions were discriminatory and breached the multinational bloc's fundamental values. The move resulted in the freezing of billions of euros worth of funding for Poland. In 2022, Poland's Supreme Administrative Court ruled that the effect of the resolutions was a violation of the dignity, honor, good name, and closely related private life of a specific group of residents and deemed them unconstitutional. The court held that Poland has a duty to protect all citizens, including members of minority groups. In the aftermath, all of the local resolutions were repealed, leaving Lankut the final holdout of the country. Counselors have been taught a lesson not to succumb to propaganda that appeals to their emotions, said an activist who ran the so-called Atlas of Hate. Remember that?
Yes.
An interactive online map illustrating the regions with the LGBT-free declarations. In 2021, the European Commission warned 5 Polish regions that declaring LGBT-free unwelcome territories, workplace, or services constitutes an action that is against the values set out in Article 2 of the Treaty of the European Union. Municipalities with those discriminatory policies were notified that they wouldn't receive funding for infrastructure, environmental initiatives, or other EU-sponsored projects. This is a lesson for Hungary. Later in 2021, the EU Parliament formally condemned Poland for trying to create LGBT-free zones, with lawmakers comparing the policy to Jew-free zones that existed in the years before and during World War II. By early 2020, roughly 1/3 of the country had established these zones. The European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said in the State of the Union address the same year that LGBT-free zones are humanity-free zones. They have no place in our union. she told European lawmakers, "I will not rest when it comes to building a union of equality, a union where you can be who you are and love who you want without fear of recrimination or discrimination." She did not mention Poland by name, but we all know what she was talking about.
Who knew we were going to move to Poland?
The repeal in Poland comes amid a wave of anti-LGBTQ legislation arising in the fellow member nation of Hungary, which Linda just mentioned, as well as Vladimir Putin's continued crackdown on LGBTQ plus identity in Russia with his implementation of successively broader anti-LGBTQ propaganda laws. So this is a tale for our time.
Yes.
Now, there's a big reversal that happened in the UK, and I hate to even discuss it, but it's all in the news.
I know. And you only have like another, few minutes, so,
Well, I have all kinds of stuff to talk about.
well, I know, but
The UK trans groups have responded to a high court ruling that trans women aren't considered women under the Equalities Law. 20,000 people have flooded Parliament Square in protest, and let's look at a picture of a protest right now. The UK Supreme Court says that only cisgender women fit the legal definition of women in the country. In an 88-page decision announced last Wednesday, the court's 5 judges said the concept of sex is binary. A person is either a woman or a man. I mean, this decision is absolutely outrageous and has sent the UK reeling.
what is wrong with it, Prince?
What happened was Scotland, which is part of the UK, but has a semi-autonomous government, passed a law in 2018 that all Scottish public organizations must have equal parity between men and women, and trans women were considered part of the women's portion. Then this turf group called For Women Scotland sued over the use of trans women in the requirement. They argued that services dedicated to women would be negatively impacted, like sports teams, changing rooms, and shelters for victims of domestic violence. The group lost its case in Scotland, but Wednesday's decision overturns that. Anti-trans groups cheered the ruling. And then they said, well, yeah, but transgender people aren't going to be discriminated against under the law. I mean, they're just being erased. Hate crimes against transgender people have increased almost 200% in the last 5 years in England and Wales. In 2023, we recall Brianna Gay was murdered in the park by 2 other teens. Yeah. The British government agreed with the court's decisions, saying that the ruling brings clarity and confidence for women in service providers, but that is absolutely false. Everybody's, one other headline is that trans women are now going to be strip searched by male police, British Transit Authority after the ruling. The National Health Services doesn't know what to do. I mean, they're all saying, well, let's just wait and see, don't panic.
What a mess.
So in sort of a nod to my personal preference, I have a self-indulgent article about, Lynn and I just watched the end of season 3 of Bridgerton.
Yes.
And several Bridgerton cast members have come out against this law. So let's take a picture now let's look at a picture of Nicola Coughlan, Ajoa Ado, and Charita Chandran, who have spoken out in support of trans rights in the face of this draconian Supreme Court ruling. Nicola is Penelope. Chahitra plays Edra Sharma. Yeah. And the third, Ado, it plays Lady Darlington. And they all, with one voice, have decried this law. On another note, I'd like to show you a picture now of the Tiny Crab Museum. that is clawing back at UK anti-trans ruling in the most iconic way. They issued a statement. It's a crab museum in Kent, a free-to-enter museum focusing on history, biology, and the ecology of crabs. It roundly rejected the ruling as representatives accused the court of voting to exclude a group of persecuted people from equality legislation. The ruling determined that it would be incoherent to define trans women as female or trans men as male under the Equality Act of 2010, in a case centered on whether trans women count as women for the purposes of gender equity mandates. Government officials have said the ruling offers clarity, as I just said, but could not explain last week which public facilities trans people are allowed to use, and some advocates warn that the ruling could have far-ranging negative effects. No kidding. But this crab museum also joined in rejecting the court's, in rejecting the court's ruling by several other UK museums, including London's own Vagina Museum, as the two museums have worked together on educational exhibits and programming in the past. Beginning as a series of pop-up exhibitions in 2017, Vagina Museum staff have stated for years that their museum is trans and intersex inclusive, despite backlash from prominent anti-trans campaigners like J.K. Rowling, who really financed the activism behind this law.
We need to move on.
Can I just do one more story?
No,
It's
because-
very close to my heart.
Well, we'll see when we finish this, if you can.
You can hope I talk fast.
Okay. I suppose I can save it till next time,
I
if
just-
necessary.
Yeah. I wanted to show a small clip that was on Democracy Now! Of Becca Ballant talking about, what we need to do in this country, and also talking a little bit about her background. So here's the clip.
You lost your grandfather in the Holocaust?
I did. And I have often asked myself throughout my adulthood, what would I do in the face of such depravity? And the answer is, you don't lose your voice. You stand up. And he lost his life in the last few weeks of the war, standing up for another who was imprisoned. They were on a forced march out of Mauthausen concentration camp. And one of his fellow prisoners fell behind, and he stayed back to help him, and they were both executed. And that has ridden me my whole life. You do the right thing, even in the midst of depravity, even when there is danger. You have to have skin in the game. And that's my message to all Americans. We all have to stand up for each other.
Then we have an ongoing boycott of Target seems to be working. They've had less foot traffic for 10 consecutive weeks. And Costco, on the other hand, who supported DEI initiatives, has marked its 6th straight week of increasing foot traffic. So that's good.
That's great.
Yeah. Democrat U.S. Representative Robert Garcia of California traveled to El Salvador on Monday alongside 3 Democrat colleagues to demand the return of the unlawfully deported immigrants, including gay Venezuelan asylum seeker Andre Jose Hernandez Romero, whose whereabouts remains unknown after being secretly transferred to one of the world's harshest prisons.
And I think you reported last time that a lot of cities want to make Romero the Grand Marshal of the Pride Parade.
Yes. On Saturday, Charleston resident Ellie Marie Quick walked into an Ultra store and spotted Mace in the skin care aisle. He asked a straightforward question: would she be holding?
You mean Nancy Mace, the congressperson, the notorious transphobe?
Yeah.
Okay.
She who should not be named.
Apparently.
Yeah, really. Yes. If she is holding an actual town hall anytime soon. She responded by filming him shouting, "Fuck you," and later posting the video on social media, framing Murray Quick, a gay small business owner, as the aggressor. But the video she shared, which has since been viewed by 7 million people, shows Murray Quick standing calmly at a distance, never threatening her.
So Murray Quick is the woman who asked the question.
Yeah,
If she was going to show at town hall? If she was going to be at a town hall?
yeah, and she just said, "Fuck you."
That's nice treatment
I
of a
know.
constituent.
She's really sweet. Then we have the Beckett Fund, previously known as the Beckett Fund for Religious Liberty and Beckett Law. And it's a right-wing firm that litigates cases to erode reproductive freedom and LGBTQ plus rights and contraception access. Its court ruled 5-4 on partisan lines to undermine contraceptive care under the Affordable Care Act, allowing bosses to block employees' access to birth control. And I guess I will just try to figure out here what I really want to get across to people.
That we're having a fun time?
Oh, here, the Department of Education has told the University of Pennsylvania that it has violated its interpretation of Title IV by allowing transgender athletes to compete in women's athletic sports. The DOE has given the university 10 days to ban trans athletes from women's sports, to erase any of their competitive records and awards, and send apologetic letters to female athletes whose experiences have been marred by sexual discrimination.
Hold that thought.
Okay, I'll have to save these ones for next time.
So I want to start by, if you haven't seen Boston Spirit, it's not only available online, but you get this for free by going online and subscribing. And they may have done a feature story on our own emoji nightmare, talking about their history of creating Drag Queen Story Hour here in Vermont. And if that wasn't enough, there's a nice highlight about what our Attorney General, Charity Clark, is doing to protect our rights and to protect democracy.
Yay.
So, Boston Spirit. And I believe an interview might have been done with him in the past.
That's right, we interviewed Rob Phelps, the editor.
Go look for the interview. So I'm sure everyone by now knows about the raid at Pleasant Valley Farms, where they actually took migrant workers into custody who we thought were protected. We should be very vigilant. I want to remind people of several years ago when Bruto was taken into ICE custody while going to a hearing, out immigrant worker working with migrant justice. We're a target. One of the things that I think we forget, we're in Montpelier. We have a major employer who has a significant portion of their staff who are working on visas. We've got ICE roaming in our communities, and we just may not be seeing them. And think of the people who have been taken into custody, plain clothes, masks, no identification. And I'm bringing this up because we have a member of our community who's actively involved in what's called the Red Card Project. And we'll put their email contact back up. It's a card that you give to new Americans about what their rights are.
Not that it matters specifically.
Well,
you know.
I mean, they are finding so many ways around it, but at least it's something. And the Kellogg Hubbard Library also has them available, and they're available in multiple languages. So please look them out. And then I'm going to spend some time talking about Maine, because I'm watching them closely because I have concerns that what Maine is experiencing, Vermont could very easily be in a similar situation. Looking at some of the current directives where they're trying to go after sanctuary states and sanctuary cities. Montpelier and Winooski are both sanctuary cities.
Is Burlington?
They have some policies, but I'm not sure they're officially a sanctuary city. But Vermont is seen as being a sanctuary state for a number of things, including our shield laws, which just got enhanced, which is a good thing. In Maine, the Department of Justice has filed a suit against them for their non-compliance about transgender students and Title IX. And the question that's coming up, and will get appealed to the Supreme Court again, is under the definition of sex, is sexual orientation and gender identity included under that definition, and thinking about what happened in the UK? And if so, what does that really mean? Interesting federal appeal court decisions, though. They had pulled money from the school lunch programs and the education, some of the education funding. The Federal Court of Appeals said, you've got to give that money back, that it is not correct that you can withhold those funds. Also, that lovely conservative representative in their house who was censored, they filed, or she filed, an appeal with the Federal Appeals Court asking them to overturn Ryan Fecteau and the House's decision to censor them. That got turned down, and got turned down more like a slap than a dismissal. You know, there is due process. You cannot show that there's harm being done here. You have a mechanism where this can be resolved, and you're choosing not to do it.
Yeah.
And the reporting on this story is what I really look at, because it's interesting. Mainstream media is reporting it as this is, you know, her talking out against inclusion of transgender athletes. That's not the issue. The issue is you posted information about a minor on your personal Facebook page without authorization.
Right.
That is the issue. And all that she would have to do to be given back, you know, those voting rights, I can speak on the floor, is to apologize to the athlete for having done that. It's not asking you have to retract your stance on transgender athletes. You need to apologize for what you did against this minor.
Don't you think hell will freeze over first?
There's some times that I think it might have. Okay, and then really quickly, because I know Ann's biting that she's got things she really wants to.
Me too.
Going on that theme of, you know, recognition and looking at what's happening, there has been a preliminary injunction against the executive order barring the use of gender X identifiers on passports. And there were several transgender non-binary people who the ACLU submitted a suit. The judge is saying there's no reason why this shouldn't be granted. That the standard requires the government to demonstrate that its actions are substantially related to an important governmental interest. The government has failed to meet this standard. Oops. But what the ACLU is looking at doing is filing additional suit saying not only should this be specific to these litigants, but it's across the board. And for those of us who already have gender X markers, this is what we're looking for, because when it comes up for renewal, I don't want to have to go back to a binary system.
Yeah.
And with that, I'm gonna hand you back a little time.
Thank you, because I have a editorial comment. I just have to say that Janet Mills, the governor of Maine, is a profile in courage.
Absolutely. I mean, when she stood up and said,
See in court.
what, and that, 47 said, I am the law, that's what prompted the I'll see you in court. It's like anyone who understands basic civics knows the three branches of government, and you've overstepped, sir. So,
Right.
Why doesn't the Democratic Party just say, see you? I mean,
we'll talk about this over dinner.
Never mind.
Well, one.
Anne's biting at the chops to do
I
this
know it.
story.
One story I unfortunately overlooked was a transgender voice in this UK controversy. The UK's first transgender judge has appealed to the European Court of Human Rights over the Supreme Court ruling. Let's take a look at her. Her name is Victoria MacLeod, Dr. Victoria MacLeod. She's the UK's only trans judge, and she's planning to take the government to the European Court of Human Rights over this anti-trans ruling on biological sex. She came out as trans in her 20s, and the court had failed to said the court had failed to consider human rights arguments that would have been put by trans people. No trans people were considered when they deliberated. The judgment had left her with legal nonsense of being two sexes at once. Speaking on BBC, trans people were wholly excluded from this court case. I applied to be heard. Two of us did. We were refused. The court heard no material going to the question of the proportionality and impact on trans people. It didn't hear evidence from us. The Supreme Court has failed, in my view, adequately to think about human rights points. On the 16th of April, anti-trans activists won, and this is stepping back because I didn't give you a full picture when I rushed through it before. I'll rush through it now. Anti-trans activists won their Supreme Court challenge over the definition of a woman, which will affect the lives of trans women across the UK. The Good Law Project said the court didn't hear from a single trans person. The ruling sets a dangerous precedent and erases trans women from protections. It puts trans rights back 20 years. We won't stop fighting for trans rights. Backed financially by J.K. Rowling, who's now known for spouting controversial posts on social media about the trans community. The gender critical campaign group for Women Scotland, which I mentioned, said the Equality Act's definition of woman was limited to people born biologically female. 5 judges from the UK Supreme Court agreed, ruling that the legal definition of woman in the Equality Act of 2010 does not include trans women who hold gender recognition certificates. This decision means trans women can no longer sit on public boards and places set aside for women. In a move widely criticized by the LGBTQ plus advocacy groups, legal experts, politicians, and community peers, the Equality and Human Rights Commission subsequently published an interim update on the practical implications of the UK Supreme Court judgment. Non-statutory guidance that many experts believe misinterprets the court decision is a huge overreach and undermines trans rights. Some of these groups said, we cannot talk about feminism unless our feminism includes trans folks. We cannot talk about reproductive rights without trans rights. We cannot advocate for human rights without trans rights. The Vagina Museum statement read in part, we will continue to abide by
I think you've been there.
We will continue to abide by our values and ensure that the Vagina Museum remains a space in which trans people are included, welcomed, and celebrated. And one thing I looked, I mean, it can be repealed if the Supreme Court overturns it in another bill. It can be repealed by the legislature, and it also can be repealed by the UN Commission of Human Rights, and there are a couple of other ways. So it's really important. All this activism and resistance is really important. Now, I was going to do the Publishing Triangle Awards, but we'll have to wait for next time.
Did you hear, I mean, this doesn't have much to do with LGBTQ stuff, except that Trump has ordered artifacts that belong to other people from the Black History Museum in D.C. to be taken out.
Yeah.
Is he going to do the same of returning the elders to the indigenous community that we've been putting on display for years?
Exactly. All right. Well,
Okay, so
Okay.
the trivia question.
All right.
Did I have you intrigued? that
Yes.
I did. So, National Humor Month. You know, I Google searched and said, who was the first out LGBTQ stand-up comedian?
What's her name?
Hold on. No, hold the thought. They came back with Bob Smith, who we know and love. First openly gay comedian to appear on The Night Show. First openly gay comedian to have his own HBO comedy special. He, along with fellow comedians Joff Cohen and Danny McWilliams, formed the troupe Funny Gay Males. Now, he's the one who developed Lou Gehrig's disease and died at a very young age. He was the one with the rainbow kitchen mitten saying, I think we've gone too far. But my dissenting opinion, and this is based upon my youth and watching the Ed Sullivan Show during those formative years, I think it's Loretta Mary Aiken, who we may all know as Mom's Mabley.
I love her.
Didn't you love her? Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, and with that, and as Moms is our inspiration,
Resist.